Protecting associates and the environment from exposure to chemicals are two important considerations in your company's overall safety and health program. The chemical safety part of the safety and health program is called Hazard Communications, Right to Know, and oftentimes just referred to as HAZCOM. But it's really information you need to know to protect yourself from potential hazards associated with the use, handling, storing, and disposing of chemicals and other hazardous substances. You might associate hazardous chemicals with industrial applications or large spills you see on television, and that would be correct. But chemicals or hazardous substances are everywhere, and they're in your workplace. Now, there's no need to be alarmed. Millions of people work safely around chemicals every day, and so can you. All you need to do is follow the procedures outlined in this program and take personal responsibility for your safety and the safety of those around you. Your property has a written Hazard Communications HAZCOM plan outlining safety steps and procedures, training information, chemical inventory, labeling procedures, and other information your company considers important when using, handling, storing, and disposing of chemicals. The written plan is your guide to safety and health, as well as making sure all the regulatory standards of hazard communications are achieved. The written plan also identifies the person or persons who are responsible for the chemical inventory, the written procedures, and coordinating the HAZCOM program plan in your organization, as well as properly maintaining all safety data sheets, also known as SDSs. We'll discuss safety data sheets in just a few minutes, but for now, let's take a basic look at chemicals and how they can affect your safety and health. We can't possibly cover the many thousands of chemicals and hazardous substances in this short program, so let's concentrate on the basics. First of all, everyone is involved in handling chemicals. You and your family use them every day at home. Pesticides, cleaning supplies, soaps, detergents, batteries, insect killers, antifreeze in your car, and many others. Just because you use chemicals at work, don't think safety ends when you leave work. Everyone comes in contact with chemicals every day, whether it's at home or at work. Part of the hazard communication requirements of OSHA are labeling requirements. Labels are designed to provide information on chemical contents of a substance or material and also what specific physical and health hazards they present. The manufacturer, importer, or distributor is responsible for labeling containers, but the employer must adhere to the following. Ensure all containers of chemicals in the workplace are labeled. Container labels for purchased chemicals must include the name and address of the chemical manufacturer, importer, or other responsible party. If a container is not labeled, obtain a label or the label information from the manufacturer, importer, or other responsible party, or prepare a label using information obtained from these sources. Employers are responsible for ensuring containers in the workplace are labeled. Manufacturers and companies that make chemical labels must provide standardized labels and ensure safety data sheets are compliant with a globally harmonized system of classification and labeling of chemicals standard known as GHS. Every chemical must be identified and labeled, regardless of the size of the chemical container. Employees must label portable containers into which they have dispensed a chemical. Each label will have the following information: product identifier, supplier identification, precautionary statements, hazard pictograms, signal word, hazard statement, and supplemental information. While all the information contained in a label is important, you need to make sure you have reviewed labels for all chemicals in use and have a good understanding of the precautionary statement, hazard pictograms, signal word, and hazard statement. The precautionary statement basically provides all the safety rules you should follow when using, storing, and disposing of a chemical. But one of the most important pieces of information in this section is first aid information. Always be familiar with first aid requirements of chemicals you are using. The hazard pictogram is a symbol that helps you to visually recognize potential hazards associated with the chemical. Oxidizer. Flammables, self-reactives, pyrophorics, self-heating, emits flammable gas, and organic peroxides. Explosives, self-reactives, organic peroxides. Acute toxicity, severe. Corrosives, gases under pressure. Carcinogen, respiratory sensitizer, reproductive toxicity, target organ toxicity, mutagenicity, aspiration toxicity. Environmental toxicity, irritant, dermal sensitizer, acute toxicity, harmful, narcotic effects, respiratory tract irritation. The signal word provides you a single word that will help you understand quickly the possible hazards associated with the chemical. The two signal words used in labels are warning and danger. A warning indicates the chemical may have low to moderate hazards, while a danger indicates a chemical may have high to severe hazards. The hazard statement provides you a written explanation of the chemical hazards associated with the chemical and complements your understanding of the information provided to you with the pictograms and signal word. Normally, all cleaning supplies are properly labeled by the manufacturer. The most important rule about chemicals is to read, understand, and follow all instructions printed on the label. Oftentimes, manufacturers will provide additional information about the safe use of a chemical beyond what is required. Reading all parts of a label is a good rule for all chemicals and substances. Two of the most commonly labeled chemicals in the workplace are irritants and corrosives, which can cause injury to your skin, eyes, and respiratory system. Also, be aware that sometimes irritants and corrosives are referred to as caustics. Many cleaning and solvent chemicals can be either an irritant or a corrosive. Wear proper personal protective equipment or PPE is needed to avoid skin and eye contact. Make sure your work area is well ventilated or wear a respirator, if required, to avoid inhalation of chemical vapors or mist. Should you have skin or eye contact with a chemical, generally flushing with water for 15 minutes continuously will either dilute or neutralize the chemical to reduce or eliminate its adverse effect. If you have inhaled a chemical vapor or mist, usually removing yourself from the work area to an outside area will help reduce the effects of chemical vapor or mists. If you have had accidental contact with a chemical or inhale vapors or mist, always follow the first aid instructions in the SDS. Also, if you have had physical exposure to a chemical through skin or eye contact or inhalation, it is suggested you consult with a doctor after you have received proper first aid. Also, remember to always report any harmful exposure to chemicals to your manager or supervisor. Again, we need to read, understand, and follow instructions printed on labels to protect ourselves from these potential hazards. A good, accurate, and up-to-date labeling system of all chemicals in the workplace will go a long way in preventing exposures to potential hazards. But on the other hand, a labeling system won't do any good if you ignore or fail to follow proper procedures. If you see a label you don't understand, or you're not sure exactly what the label says, ask your manager or supervisor. There's no reason to take chances. There are thousands and thousands of chemicals, with many more added each year. Even chemists and chemical engineers don't know all the chemicals or potential hazards of all chemicals. Just like you, they read safety data sheets, labels, and other information to keep informed. You need to keep informed and make sure all chemicals are properly identified and labeled. Can you be sure the chemical container you used yesterday will have the same chemical in it today? You won't know unless the container is properly labeled. Take labeling seriously, and that means following the directions printed on the label. It's just good business, and after all, safety and health is an important issue. Safety data sheets, or SDSs, are provided by the manufacturer for all hazardous chemicals and substances used in your facility. These SDSs are for your use in the event you want more information on the chemicals you're using in the workplace. Generally, safety data sheets are maintained in an office, in other designated areas, or in an online database, so if you need more information, ask your manager or supervisor. What information is available in an SDS? The SDSs have 16 information sections that conform with the requirements of the GHS of Classification and Labeling of Chemicals Standard. The 16 sections include identification of chemical, hazard identification, composition information on ingredients, first aid measures, firefighting measures, accidental release measures, handling and storage, exposure controls, personal protection, physical and chemical properties, stability and reactivity, toxicological information, ecological information, disposal considerations, transport information, regulatory information, other information including date of preparation or last revision. Generally, the information in an SDS is much more technical than is normally provided on labels. While all sections of an SDS contain important information, 4 sections you need to really understand from a practical standpoint and day-to-day use of a chemical are first aid, accidental release measures, handling and storage, and disposal considerations. In the event of accidental contact or exposure to a chemical, Section 4, First Aid, will provide you or a doctor helpful first aid and treatment information to reduce the likelihood of injury or illness from exposure to the chemical. Section 6, Accidental Release Measures, will provide information on personal protective equipment, PPE, you should wear when using a chemical. This section will also provide you with steps you should take to contain or clean up a chemical to prevent environmental harm if it is accidentally spilled. Section 7, Handling and Storage, will provide you information on how to store chemicals to reduce the possibility of fire, combustion, or cross-contamination with other chemicals that could create a harmful atmospheric condition or harm to the workplace or environment. Section 12, Disposal Considerations, provides valuable information on the proper disposal of used chemical containers or chemicals no longer used to prevent injury or illness to people handling the disposal of chemicals, as well as potential harm to the environment. One last important note about labeling in SDSs. Under the HAZCOM standard, chemicals used in the workplace, which are purchased from local retail stores, such as cleaning supplies, detergents, and similar chemicals, require you to obtain a safety data sheet and affix proper labeling before they can be used in the workplace. Usually, your manager or supervisor will obtain the SDS at the store where the chemical was purchased or directly from the manufacturer. These chemicals must also be properly labeled by the manufacturer, and everyone should read and follow the instructions and warnings printed on these chemicals. Remember, even chemicals purchased at a local retail store can be hazardous if not used, handled, stored, and disposed of properly. Again, SDSs are available to anyone asking for the information. As in any operation, if you have a question about the chemicals, substances, and materials you're working with, or you're not sure how to safely use, handle, store, and dispose of these items, ask questions. Knowledge truly is power, especially when it comes to your safety and health. Now let's take another minute to discuss personal protective equipment, or PPE. Most chemicals require the use of some form of protection. What protection is required is listed both on the container label and in the SDS for that product. Don't guess about what PPE is required. Find out the proper protection and use it every time. Before we wrap this up, keep in mind all chemicals can be potentially harmful. Now let's recap by reviewing some universal safety rules for the safe use and handling of chemicals. Only use chemicals you have been trained to use and for the task they are designed to be used for. If you need training and instruction on a chemical you have not used before, ask your manager or supervisor. Make sure your chemical containers have the correct label before using. Make sure your work area is adequately ventilated. Wear personal protective equipment, PPE, required for the safe use of the chemical. Know where the closest 15-minute continuous flow eye wash station is to your work area. If you have skin or eye contact, or inhale chemical vapors or mists, follow the first aid information in the SDS. Clean up any chemical spill following the instructions on the label and in the SDS. Store your chemicals properly. Follow the instructions in the SDS. Report immediately all physical exposure to a chemical and spills to a manager or supervisor. Thank you for listening and watching. Take the information you learned in this program and put it to work on every job every day. Again, remember, if you want to learn more about the chemicals with which you work, ask your manager or supervisor for a safety data sheet for those particular chemicals. Read and follow the directions on all labels, and of course, always wear proper personal protective equipment when it's required. Use your experience and good judgment and take time for safety. It's worth it. Thank you.